Okay, we're all good.
And we're back for the third and final part, in which we're gonna touch on the possible solutions, which, skipping ahead, there aren't any sure solutions for this issue, but we're gonna try and look at the ones that are there. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna cover like some of the solutions, and the best one I'll keep till last. And you're free to comment. I'll maybe cover 6 or 7. Christian, you're free to comment as I'm covering them, or once I've covered them all. So again, as ChatGPT, finally, what do we do about it? How can we subdue this monster? How can we win? By we, I mean humanity. So what ChatGPT came up with is taming the metaphorical Moloch involves understanding and addressing systematic issues at their roots. It's about creating systems where the incentives of individuals align with the well-being of the collective. Here are some general strategies that humanity, with the assistance of AI, might employ. First of all, of course, education and awareness, which is, I hope we're contributing a little bit to that, is understanding the dynamics of collective action problems and being aware of the pitfalls can lead to more informed decisions, both on the individual and policy levels. Part 2, systemic redesign. Reevaluate and, if necessary, redesign systems, economic, political, etc., to better align individual incentives and collective good. 3, promote cooperation. Encourage cooperative rather than competitive structures where possible. Well, that I don't believe in so much, but like we discussed, ChatGPT has a little bit of a left-wing bias. But number 4 is something that I'm keeping to last, and that I was really glad to see here, and that I didn't expect ChatGPT to mention. And number 5, very interesting, AI-assisted decision-making. Use AI to assist in decision-making processes and identifying inefficiencies, predicting outcomes, and suggesting optimal strategies. 6, transparency, pretty clear. 7, regulations and checks. Again, that I personally don't believe in that much, but it's one possible way of approaching it. 8, civic engagement. Encourage active civic participation, ensuring that decisions are made with a broader perspective and are more representative of the collective will. 9, again, ethical AI. Develop and use AI ethically, ensuring it doesn't inadvertently exacerbate existing problems. And 10, pretty basic, cultural shifts. Promote cultural values that emphasize collective well-being, sustainability, and cooperation over unchecked competition and short-term gains. Any comments on that, Christian?
Yeah, definitely. So I think there is a nice broad range of different ways of looking at potentially solving this metaphorical monster that it's provided. I mean, it's provided a good range. The first couple, I think it was the first couple.
Yeah, I can. Education and awareness, systemic redesign, promote cooperation. Like I said, 10 points are a little bit sometimes of a stretch. Some of them repeat themselves a little bit. I'm sure.
Yes. So I do think there's a danger of, like, it's got this idea of systemic redesign, for example, or however it's put it there. So I think there's often this like tempting idea that, okay, if incentives and like collective actions are not sort of adding up and, I guess, resulting in something good for that collective, or contributing to some sort of negative outcome, there's this tempting idea to either redesign that system completely, or to provide an answer like in a real centralized way. So I guess to solve it by like from the top down sort of thing. And I think that's where there is this like real danger, because it assumes that, well, one, that those sorts of actions can be controlled in any like centralized way, and that would be like effective. And I think a real like dangerous sort of thing you could see there is this idea of, I'm not sure if I'm sure you've probably come across something like this before, Andrei, and others would have too, but this idea of like techno-socialism, for example, or what do they call it, luxury capitalism or something, fully automated or something. And you've got this idea that, well, if like companies and like whole economies can, or like whole sections of the market can be like run and managed by big centralized systems, which could be, say, automated systems, and that those systems can like really effectively run things by being able to compute huge sums and things like that. If that's possible and we have that technology, then why don't we just get some giant supercomputer to dictate like how the market works and how everything is distributed? Because, you know, why wouldn't that work? You know, it can determine how much we need to be able to live comfortably, or all sorts of things, like sorts of crazy sort of techno idealist dystopian ideas come to mind with this sort of thing. But when we reach for like that sort of solution, it really, it's like the sort of fantasy component of that comes in, where, say, we take like an economy, which like a reasonably free economy, or even some of these like mixed economies, and if we look at them properly, they are like huge decentralized things that are going on. And like the complexity involved with multiple actors, I mean, with huge amounts of actors making, you know, countless actions every week, say, and you've got that whole dynamic of like the invisible hand that is like disrupting things in society. And even in like the most imperfect markets and economies, or like heavily regulated economies, for instance, you can see that it's decentralized things that are going on. And so I just think there's this danger that we think we can simplify something which like can't really be spoken of accurately in those sorts of ways, but also it can lead to us not understanding the nature of the problem, or choosing a solution which really leads to some sort of crazy outcomes. Because I don't know what you could expect like a giant supercomputer to do with an economy, but it's I mean, it's hard to see how any of that could add up to something good and something sort of life affirming or freedom sort of orientated, you know.
Yeah, very true, very true. And I think you briefly touched on the subject that on the solution that I like the most among the ones that GPT has suggested. And that is the veil comes off now. My favorite solution for the Moloch issue, as well as for many other issues, is decentralization. Distribute decision-making powers to reduce the risks associated with centralized systems. Local knowledge can often lead to better outcomes. And what's interesting here is that is a kind of an explanation hidden here of why a giant supercomputer in and of itself will not solve this issue. Because a giant supercomputer is going to be biased in the same way that its creators are. Because if we take like ChatGPT, for example, there is a lot of criticism of ChatGPT that it has have very clear left-wing bias. It's clever. It can give you options from both sides, but by default, it is biased. And that's what I think will happen to any supercomputer created by humans, because humans are flawed, and all of their creations will be flawed in the same way. So the only solution here would be, how should I put it, not to have one giant supercomputer, but 10, 20, 100, all competing and talking to each other, and all functioning in a decentralized way. And in terms of the practical application of that, I feel like cryptocurrencies are something that can, in a way, help us solve this issue. When the money, the wealth, the decision-making is not concentrated in some set of hands, but when it's distributed as much as possible. Because something that I'd like to point out is that when you're saying, well, when you're talking to a socialist, and they're like, well, you know what like happens in the US, for instance, capitalism. Do you think it's good that Amazon has like a 90% market share of retail? I'm saying, well, what's happening in the US now is not capitalism. It's what's termed as crony capitalism. And the reason that some businesses, some ventures, some companies, some corporations have an advantage is because the government has too much power. And because these specific corporations have lobbied the government to help them advance. It's not really capitalism. Same as the Soviet Union was not really socialism or communism. It's an attempt to make a system that is this, but what we get in the end is Moloch. Moloch winning over everything. It doesn't matter if it's in a communist system, socialist system, or capitalist system. Unless we specifically pinpoint the problem and decentralize our way out of it, we're not going to have better outcomes. Trying the same things over and over again and expecting different results is what Einstein said is the definition of insanity. It's what the human race is doing. Tried capitalism, let's say in the developed world, the US and Europe. Now there's more and more like voices being heard and more push towards, oh, what about socialism? Well, what about it? Haven't you seen the biggest experiment in human history that failed tremendously? Like, how can we be so stupid? I think that, to sum it up, decentralization, crypto is something that we haven't really, can it go horribly wrong? Of course it can. And it is, and it will in many facets. But we haven't fully tried it. And I feel that this is our only hope, to be honest.
Yeah, I think like that sort of technology, like decentralizing, and I mean, incredibly powerful technology, should be able to provide us with, well, it's how we can provide ourselves with some great potential to do things differently and to not be like completely confined by what sort of the governing powers and those sorts of structures sort of limit us to. I think that point that you spoke on regarding like regulation and the way that actually sets up like the grounds for that crony capitalism, or like those huge crazy like bureaucracies of supposedly socialist and communist countries. I think that really gets to the heart of it. And you know, one of my biggest sort of objections to like the Moloch essay that I looked at, that is, I guess, a key authority on this topic, and that a lot of us have seen online. A big thing was, I think it was about halfway through the essay, the writer started to go on about how really the biggest solution is to find like regulation or laws that can make a difference. But he completely like missed the the fact that it's those regulations and laws, those very things, which
that cause it. Yeah.
which enable businesses to then go and get like a leg up on all of their competition in the market, and suddenly build like an actual like coercive monopoly. Because I don't think monopolies like in and of themselves are necessarily like a bad thing. The principle itself, like if you imagine the first person to go out and like say mine an asteroid or something, and they're like the one asteroid shop or something, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are bad because they're the one player. But as soon as they can act in some coercive ways, and the terminology that some people use is like, as soon as they can work like by the gun or by force, then that suddenly creates a coercive monopoly. But if we could, I guess we're close to wrapping things up, but if we could maybe start one more recording, there's just a couple of points I'd quite like to
for sure. Let's do that.
Okay, cool.